Hi everyone, welcome to PYC3701, Chapter 8, Social Influence. Okay, this is one of the most interesting chapters in the book, and what I've done is I've got these really lovely videos. So we're going to sit through quite a few videos in this presentation because, I weighed up leaving them out, but I decided that it's much better to put them all in and watch all of them. And you'll have to excuse me because they're like 1,000 flies trying to land on my face. So let's get started. I hope this helps. Don't forget the like, subscribe, and share buttons. And let's get going. Okay, right. So there's 4 things we're looking at: conformity, compliance, symbolic social influence, and obedience. Okay. Most interesting one is the last of these, obedience, but they're all interesting. Okay, so social influence. What is social influence? It's when some people are trying to change what other people say, do, or think. Okay? So we come to the famous conformity experiment conducted by Solomon Asch in the 1950s. Okay, as we can all see, that line is the same length as only one of those lines. But he found that people consistently changed what they did and what they thought to match existing social norms. And we'll look at a video in a mo. Most people comply with social norms most of the time, and this is wonderful. It's very, very important. This keeps the traffic safe and sound and predictable. This makes it possible to go into a shop without having a fist fight. This makes it possible to walk down the street without falling over. This is very, very, very important. Dinner parties, going to the bank, everything that we do, we're complying with social norms. Very important. We need social norms. It keeps society going along. Okay? Now, when there's no consequences, no one can see that you're not conforming, people just pretend to conform a lot of the time. So it's a lot of the time it's got more to do with appearances than what people really think or feel or do. And we do conform a lot more than we think we do, the introspection illusion. And this is related to the actor-observer effect. So we see everyone else and we go, they all look the same, they're all conforming. But me, I'm focusing on my individuality and my individual motives, so I'm not seeing the amount of conforming that I'm actually doing, and I'm not giving other people credit for how individualistic they all are. Okay, so Solomon Asch did this experiment on conformity, and he asked people to say whether it's A, B, or C that is closest to that line, and everyone can clearly see which one it is. But when everyone else says that it's the wrong answer, you go along with it. And this was true for 75% of the people in the experiment if they were asked to state their positions in public. If they didn't have to do that, if they just had to do a poll, the effect was still significant, but far less. It was about half of that, I think, a third of the people. Oh, by the way, anything I do that's incorrect, please correct me in the comments so we all learn the right thing and not the wrong thing. Okay, so norms. Right, why do we have norms? Okay, one of the reasons is to have a point of reference. Okay, so if you don't have a point of reference, you can't see what's going on. So in a dark room, or if sometimes with the stars, if you don't see the other stars, you'll see the one star looks like it's moving. It's called the autokinetic phenomenon because of the way your eye works. So one of the ways we get to know whether we're correct or not, is that a UFO or a star, is by asking other people, okay, and seeing what they're doing. And it's also how we get accepted and liked by other people. Factors affecting conformity. Okay, cohesiveness. If you want to belong to a group, you want to conform with them so that you are accepted. And the more highly you regard the group, the more conformist you are. Particularly painful when you're a young teenager and you're trying to fit in. Okay, so you also want to be liked and accepted. And in order to be liked and accepted, you've got to be like everyone else, which is what we did in the previous chapter. And we know this, so we go along to get along. Okay, the larger the group, the stronger the conformity. Now this number is based on Solomon Ash's research. So he only went up to the number 8, but he did find that there's a correlation between the larger the group and the stronger the conformity. I think with very large groups, possibly that starts to break down. Okay, so now we're looking at norms. There are 4 kinds: formal, informal, descriptive, and injunctive. Remember the injunctive one. It gets asked in a lot of the exams. Formal norms. These are written or stated rules. And so we have informal norms, which are unstated rules that everyone knows. Descriptive norms. Descriptive norms are what most people do in a situation. Injunctive norms. This is what you should do. These are the shoulds and the oughts and what is the right thing to do. Normative focus theory. Okay, this is about being focused on whether it matters or not. So we follow norms if we are salient, okay? So for example, I'm in a foreign country. In this country, it's the norm to put on shoes every time you go to the bathroom. But for me, that doesn't matter. It's my bathroom. I don't put on shoes every time I go to the bathroom. So that's normative focus theory. I'm not following the injunctive norm because it's not salient to me. There's nobody to observe. There's no one to offend. Normative social influence. By agreeing with other people and being similar to them, we get them to like us. We alter our behavior to meet their norms. So normative social influence is about being liked and changing your behavior. And there's a second social influence that we need to know, it's important, and that is informational social influence, which is about looking to the group to get information, to learn from them. Very important. Okay, we want to get things right, and this is one of the best ways to find out what's right to do.
They made people cut off from their family and friends. They made people be in couples, so they had no privacy. They changed their names. They changed their clothing. They changed their diet. It's classic mind control, in my opinion, to create a new pseudo-identity that was obedient.
The experiment of Solomon Asch examines behavior under the pressure of social forces.
In my practice, when I'm doing interventions with people, I show videos of the Asch conformity study.
The experiment you'll be taking part in today involves the perception of lengths of lines. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length.
And everybody was in on the experiment except the person in seat 6. And they start giving the correct answer for 2 rounds, and then they all start giving the wrong answer.
2.
2. 2. 2.
2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence.
And this experiment has been done over and over again for decades. And the answer universally is 2/3 of everyone who does this experiment starts giving the wrong answer.
1. They must be right. There are 4 of them and 1 of me.
1. We all want to think that we're independent and we would never agree. But the science, the social science says we're programmed to fit into groups. We're going to start adapting to the people in our environment in order to fit in.
We're glad you're here.
Okay. All right. So this is an example of someone who is nonconformist. So the story goes as follows. there was a Black Lives Matter protest happening, and there was a far-right bunch of white people who went there to harass and cause trouble. What happened is that one of the guys got separated from his group, and now he was in danger of being severely beaten by Black Lives Matter group. This guy picked him up and carried him to safety. So he went against the conformity of his group, which took great courage and individualism. Okay. So let's look at nonconformity and what factors help people to be nonconformist, for better and for worse, of course. All right. So the first factor is social power. The more social power you have, the easier it is to be nonconformist. So if you think about it, there's a lot of famous people out there who are really strange. So why is this? Firstly, you are less dependent on others because you are wealthy and powerful. Secondly, you're less vulnerable to control from others. Ditto. You don't have to wear your mask, whereas everybody who's under control ends up having to wear their mask. And thirdly, you are less likely to take the perspective of others, for better and for worse. Okay, there's another kind of nonconformity, the bad boys. So why do we have bad boys? We have bad boys because women like it. So men are nonconformist in order to attract women. But are women nonconformist in order to attract men? On the whole, no. Of course, there are some outliers, but generally, no. In fact, women will conform more in order to attract a mate, in accordance with gender stereotypes. So, when nonconformity is valued as part of a person's identity, so they can be unique, and a lot of people do want to be unique, they are more nonconformist if you challenge that part of their identity, if you bring it to the forefront of their minds, and are you really, then people are more nonconformist. Okay, emotions are contagious, so when we're part of a group, what one person feels, a lot of other people are also going to feel. But if you identify as different to that person, if you see that person as other, you may feel contrasting emotions. She's angry, I'm happy. Okay? Are women more conformist than men? Well, in real life, yes. And then there were a number of experiments which found yes, but is it really so? If they took out the lower social status that was affecting the outcome of those that research, then some people found no, women are not more conformist than men. But generally, because women have lower social status, you will find that they will actually tend to be more conformist. Okay. So let's look at the majority versus the minority. Society can change quite rapidly based on what a minority think, and then the whole society takes on the opinions or the behavior or the feelings, the affective response of that minority. So how does the minority change the opinion and the actions of the majority? Firstly, when the minority is consistent and convinced. Okay, if we look at what Vladimir Zelensky is doing in Europe, being very consistent and convinced in order to convince Europe to protect Ukraine. Okay? Yet flexible and open enough to other opinions not to seem too dogmatic. If people are absolutely hardline, then you stop listening. And when it's also in tune with the trends, when that minority is in tune with what people are generally going to thinking at the time, in fashion, they've got a good chance of changing everything. Okay, so we've looked at social conformity. Let's look at compliance. What is compliance? Compliance is getting people to say yes. That's what it means. Getting people to say yes. In this context, in the context of social psychology, compliance means getting people to say yes. All right. So compliance professionals are people who do this kind of thing. So that's salespeople, etc. How do they do this? How do they get it right? Compliance technique number 1. Okay. Oh, sorry, I forget. There's a few little steps. I think it's 6. Creating friendship or liking. Getting people to commit or eliciting consistency. Focusing on scarcity. Reciprocity, giving to receive. Okay, 5, social validation, setting up a norm. I think we looked at, yeah, that runs through the whole book. And lastly, authority. We comply with authority, which we'll look at in the section of obedience. All right. So, liking through ingratiation. Ingratiation is about impression management. So firstly, we have flattery. Oh, you look so beautiful. Okay, creating liking. This is something we tend to do anyway, to create group liking and affection, but this isn't always about getting someone to say yes. Okay, self-promotion. I am fantastic. Da, 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 da. Okay. And incidental similarity. Oh, look, we're both in 3rd year UNISA. Okay. Commitment and consistency, the foot in the door technique. So what you do is you get people to say yes to a very small request, and then you hit them with the one you really want them to say yes to. Because they want to be consistent, they go along with you. They don't go yes, yes, no. They go yes, 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 yes.
Whoa, what's up, man? Hey, man, mind if I get a chip? Sure. Thanks. Thank you. No problem. Wait. What? I'm real hungry, man. Mind if I finish what's off for you? All right, man. I gotta eat the class. Whatever. Thank you. Randy, you the man.
All right. So, commitment and consistency, technique number 2. The low ball procedure. Okay, so first you offer people a very good deal, and then once they say yes, you bring in the real deal that you're getting them to agree to, which has got many more costs and far less benefits, and this is often done through adding on expenses, okay? This is done by dodgy insurance companies, bank loans, cell phone contracts. As you can see, it's often taken advantage of with contracts and classically with car sales. Okay.
Rustproofing.
Rustproofing?
Transport charge, storage surcharge, additional overcharge, finder's fee.
Finder's fee was on the lot.
Yeah, that's right. And, floor mats, keys.
Keys?
They're getting started.
Okay, so we've got commitment and consistency, friendship and liking. Now let's look at reciprocity. Okay, we have the door in the face technique. The door in the face technique is about making a huge request that the person's going to say no to, and then when it's refused, you ask what you really wanted, which is much more modest, and people are far more likely to help because they feel like they're being unfair. They don't like not giving to you, okay? They want to give to you.
Check this out. In 1975, researcher Robert Cialdini did a groundbreaking psychological experiment. There were 2 groups, and they asked people in the first group if they would spend 2 hours a week to mentor a prisoner over the course of 2 years.
Hello, Clarice.
Almost everyone said no. But then they downgraded their request and asked them if they would simply walk some kids around the zoo for the afternoon. For the second group, all they did was ask people to take kids to the zoo. What they found was that the group that they asked to mentor the prisoners first were more willing to take kids to the zoo than the other group. And in doing this, they proved one of the most famous and influential strategies in all of social psychology, the door-in-the-face technique.
I have a purpose.
My
Right, that's not all technique. Okay, what you do is you give someone something. Then they feel that they must give something back to you. So you either give it to them before the sale or as an excess, as a free gift that you get along with what you buy. All right? Free gift. All right. Okay, let's look at this one.
How many have had like a worse miserable dinner in their lives, and then you come home and say, well, I guess I better invite Jeffrey and Linda back. That's the norm of reciprocity. Now, how does it work? One of the classic studies to give you a feel for how this would be studied, Dennis Regan did a gift of a Coke. So people come in to a lab, they fill out the questionnaires that they always fill out, and two of them together, a real subject and a Confederate. In the middle of the experiment, the Confederate hops up out of in the normal reciprocity condition, hops out of the chair, goes over to outside, comes back with 2 Cokes, and said, "Look, I wanted a Coke for myself, and the experimenter said it was okay for me to get you one." They fill out the forms, blah blah blah, and at the end, would you be willing to buy raffle tickets for my cause? Significantly more was given when that gift was given first to create that reciprocity, to give you a feel for the power of these tactics. And that is, how can we reduce international conflict, war, intergroup hatred? Use the norm of reciprocity. And there was an approach done in the 60s that made use of this norm of reciprocity. These are not, behavioral stuff is old. This stuff is old too, but that's how you know it was working. It's not some Johnny-come-lately. This procedure is called GRIT, which was graduated reciprocation intention reduction. No one ever says. They just call it GRIT. And the idea here is to make a public announcement. We're in conflict, but I'm going to do something that's cooperative, a small act. The act should not be something like threatens your national defense. I'm going to do that, a small act. Then you do that act, and you invite reciprocation. So in the Cold War, John F. Kennedy was very worried about atmospheric test bans. He wanted to get rid of that stuff. So he has a speech at American University saying, I want to move towards peace between our nations, Soviet Union and United States, and the United States is going to stop testing atmospheric atomic bombs in the atmosphere. Please reciprocate. The Soviets then did that, and then they said, well, we're going to stop the production of strategic bombers. Please reciprocate. And the United States then sold them wheat, and then together they put in a hotline, reducing the tensions. How many have had like a worse...
Okay, right. Now, let's go on to look at scarcity. Okay, there's 2 ways that scarcity is used to get compliance. One is by playing hard to get, which we all know about for relationship courtships, okay? But also in job interviews and employer-employee haggling. I found a better job, can I have a raise? Okay? The other is in deadlines. So when you set a deadline for a sale or for an offer, it creates a sense of scarcity so that people are encouraged to buy. Okay, so we've looked at conformity and compliance. Let's look at symbolic social influence. Okay, so you don't need to have someone actually in the same room as you to be influenced by them. Just symbolically knowing that they exist or seeing a representation of them is enough to trigger behavior, thoughts, and affect. It triggers relational schemas and goals we associate with that person. Okay. So, very different feeling associated with different leaders. And of course, your own family members. And of course, like for example, if you're a Christian, you would say, well, what would Jesus do? How would Jesus respond to the situation? And you get a guideline. Okay, this is what I need to do. Okay. Let's look at obedience. People are prone to obey authority, even when they're asked to do terrible things. Even when they're asked to do things that they believe themselves are wrong. This is the milligram experiment.
A screen.
1963.
The teacher would ask questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud, horse, rock, house. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse.
Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right ahead.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
Refuses to go on. The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor, and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're going to get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
You
here.
can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man there. I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music. And
2/3 of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering with less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
Okay. Right, another video straight after that one. This is the one, I know Zimbardo was brought in earlier in the chapter for the Stanford prison experiment, but I thought he'd be more interesting here. So I've actually got 2 videos by him, and I'm going to play them both. There's many, many more videos by him, or not by him, but where he speaks and about what he did, both in Stanford and in Abu Ghraib, which was the prison in Iraq, where there were numerous atrocities committed against prisoners. So his work is pertinent until today and into the future. Right, let's watch.
Most of the evil in the world comes about not out of evil motives, but somebody saying, get with the program, be a team player. When a person feels, I am not personally responsible, I am not accountable, it's the role I'm playing, or these are the orders I've gotten, then you allow yourself to do things you would never do under ordinary circumstances.
I began to feel that I was losing my identity, that the person that I call Clay, the person who put me in this place, the person who volunteered to go into this prison, because it was a prison to me, it still is a prison to me. I don't look on it as an experiment or a simulation. It was just a prison that was run by psychologists instead of run by the state.
I had really thought that I was incapable of this kind of behavior. I was surprised, I was dismayed to find out that I could really be a, 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 that I could act in a manner so absolutely unaccustomed to anything I would even really dream of doing. And while I was doing it, I didn't feel any regret. I didn't feel any guilt. It was only afterwards when I began to reflect on what I had done that this behavior began to dawn on me, and I realized that this was a part of me I hadn't really noticed before.
I feel so up inside. I feel really up inside. You don't know. I gotta go. To a doctor, anything. I can't see that. I'm up. I don't know how to explain it. I'm up inside. Out! Now! God damn it. Up. You don't know. I mean, God. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside. Don't you know? I just can't take it.
The scene you just saw was at the end of only 36 hours into the study. Each day after that, another prisoner had a similar reaction. And so at the end of 5 days, we had 5 kids. Kids we chose because they were normal and healthy, having emotional breakdowns.
You put a uniform on and are given a role, a job, saying your job is to keep these people in line, then you're certainly not the same person as if you were in street clothes and in a different world. You really become that person once you put on that khaki uniform, you put on the glasses, you take the nightstick, and you act the part. That's your costume, and you have to act accordingly when you put it on.
It harms me.
Why?
Harms. In the present tense, it harms me.
How did it harm you? How does it harm you? Just to think about it, you mean that people can be like that?
Yeah. It let me in on some knowledge that I've never experienced firsthand. I've read about it. I've read a lot about it. But I've never experienced it firsthand. I've never seen someone turn that way. And I know you're a nice guy. You know? Do you understand? I do. I do know you're a nice guy. I don't get that because I know what you can turn into.
It surprised me that no one said anything to stop me. No one said, Carmen, you can't say those things to me. Those things are sick. Nobody said that. They just accepted what I said. I said, go tell that man to the face he's the scum of the earth, and they'd do it without question. They'd do push-ups without question. They'd sit in the hole. They'd abuse each other. And here they're supposed to have they're supposed to be together as a unit in jail, but here they're abusing each other because I requested them to, and no one questioned my authority at all. And it really shocked me. And why didn't people, when I started to abuse people so much, I started to get so profane that, and still people didn't say anything.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
As soon as I realized that 819 could hear this, I rushed to the room where I had left him. And what I found was a boy crying hysterically, while in the background his fellow prisoners were chanting and yelling that he is a bad prisoner and that they were being punished because of him.
Because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess. Because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess.
Well, I'm trying to comfort this young man, and he says, I have to go back. I said, what do you mean? I have to prove to them I'm not a bad prisoner. And at this point, I said, no, you're not a bad prisoner. You're Stu, and I'm not the superintendent. I'm Phil Zimbardo. The study is over. And he kept saying, no, I have to go back. I'm not a bad prisoner. And so the reality of that prison was so deep that even when I'm giving him the opportunity to leave, his reputation, his image as a bad prisoner has to be undone, has to be reconciled. When we released the first prisoner, 8612, we brought in a substitute, but he came in halfway through. And what's interesting is, day by day, as the situation degraded, we all adjusted to it. That each day's level of violence, of abuse, was a platform for the next day. But he comes in now, and he's seeing these crazy things going on. He says right up front, I'm not having any of this. And they told him, you can't leave. They won't let you leave, which we never said. In fact, 8612 is the one who told him, they won't let you out. And so he says, I'm going to go on a hunger strike. I'm not going to eat anything. I'll get sick, and they'll have to let me go. And he's a skinny kid to begin with. And the guards go crazy because he's now the symbol of resistance. All the other kids are broken. If they're not having emotional breakdowns, they're like zombies. They're doing whatever the guard said. And for the next 2 days, every guard on every shift, their mission is get this prisoner, eat those damn sausages. They put him in solitary confinement. They make him hold the sausages. And to his credit, he resists. So he should have been the hero. He should have been the hero for the other prisoners. Instead, he becomes a troublemaker. The guards set the other prisoners against him. They say, if he doesn't eat his sausages, you don't get your visiting hours. If he doesn't eat his sausages, you guys don't get your blankets. If he doesn't eat his sausages, we're going to put your blankets in nettles and spurs, and you're going to spend hours digging them out. So they start jumping all over him. Eat the damn sausages. You know, you're ruining our life.
Okay. All right. So, reasons for obedience. Firstly, people hand over the responsibility for their actions to the person giving the orders. Secondly, authority figures have signs of their status, uniforms, badges, hats, etc., to remind people of the norm of obeying. Thirdly, there's a gradual escalation of the orders given, so that people are led into being obedient further and further away from what they would consider to be right. And fourthly, it often all happens and unfolds very quickly, so people don't have time to think, they just respond and obey automatically. Okay, I'm going to play this one. This one will also segue into the next chapter, which is about how people end up doing the right thing for society and helping others, social altruism.
What makes us good? What makes us evil? We know a lot about one of these two. So when I ask about why do some ordinary people turn evil, here's a shopping list. There is research on every one: dehumanization, diffusion of responsibility, obedience to authority, unjust system, group pressure, power and control, moral disengagement. My colleague Al Bandura has studied this in great detail. Anonymity. When we ask the question, why do others become heroic, we don't have an answer. It could be compassion, could be empathy. Maybe there's a hero gene. Maybe oxytocin, the work of Paul Zak at Claremont, Claremont McKenna, showing that this mother love chemical in the brain increases the likelihood you behave empathic or altruistic. But heroism is something different, as we'll see. But the interesting thing, what we do know about, is the very same situation that inflames the hostile imagination of some people, making them villains. War, corruption, fraud. Instills the heroic imagination of other people to do heroic deeds. So Christians who helped Jews in the Holocaust were in the same situation, and the Nazis and other people, other civilians, worked to imprison Jews. Few people do evil, fewer act heroically. Between these extremes on the bell curve of humanity are the masses, the general population, who do nothing and do it with no imagination at all. In thinking about it, I'm going to call these reluctant heroes who refuse the call to action. And we know by doing nothing, when something is needed, they implicitly support the perpetrators of evil. So Edmund Burke says, all that matters for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So on this bell curve of humanity, villains and heroes are the outliers. I'm going to say the reluctant heroes are the rest. And our job is, how do we give a call to service of the general population? How do we make them aware of the evil that exists? How do we make them, at the same time, how do we prevent people on the evil side, people who promote these evil systems, to keep them from seducing them to their side? When we do, we convert the me into the we. Because the egocentric me has to become a sociocentric we. Heroism is about one thing. It's about a concern for other people in need, a concern for defending a moral cause, knowing there is a personal cost or risk. That's the key. And you do it without expectation of reward. So altruism is heroism light. Compassion is a virtue that may lead to heroism, but we don't know. Nobody's established that link. So we want to have new research looking at these links. Which leader would you follow? Could it all depend on the circumstances? You'd like to not believe that, but here are these great leaders, also with their masses clearly obeying them. There are many ways for ordinary people to become heroic. I'm sorry. The equal number. That's another slide. So here's just a quick run through. We know the Chinese student, the tank man, who stopped this row of tanks from coming, crushing, killing Chinese students, who was simply there saying, "We want our freedom." We know in 9/11, the firefighters from Brooklyn Heights Fire Department did extraordinary deeds of heroism. In fact, when I was president of APA, I gave a presidential citation to Richie Murray on behalf of the other firefighters. But these are men who show extraordinary courage, essentially in battle or in disaster. Abu Ghraib stopped because of this guy, the most ordinary guy in the world, Joe Darby. His buddy showed him the CD. He looked at it and he was horrified. He said, "We're supposed to be bringing dignity to these people. We're humiliating them." He took that. He's a private in the Army Reserve, gave it to a senior investigating officer, said, "Sir, you have to investigate this." And that whistleblowing had great cost to him. They had to put him in hiding for 3 years, and his mother and his wife, because not only people in his battalion wanted to kill him, people in his little hometown in Pennsylvania wanted to kill them because they embarrassed the military and the Bush administration. Here's a wonderful kid, 9-year-old, I call it a dutiful hero. In 2008, there was a massive earthquake in Sichuan province. The ceiling fell down in a school, killing almost all kids. He escaped, and as he was running away, he noticed 2 kids struggling to get out. He ran back and saved them. They said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "I was the hall monitor. It was my duty. It was my job to look after my classmates." So this is going to become really important in a minute when I talk about our new project, the Heroic Imagination Project. We think that heroism starts with this imagination, with this focus on the other. What can I do? What's my obligation towards society? Irina Sendler was a Polish hero, a Catholic who documented, saved at least 2,500 Jewish kids who were holed up in the Warsaw Ghetto that the Nazis erected before they brought the people to concentration camps at Auschwitz. She went in and had to convince Jewish parents to give her their kids because she's saying the kids are going to die. We will try to hook them up with you, if everybody lives. And she was able to smuggle out 2,500 kids. But what she did, and this is critical, she organized a network. So one of the principles we're talking about, heroes are most effective, not alone, not the soldier in battle who takes a bullet for his buddy, but forming a network. Now, the other thing is the evil of inaction. We said few people do evil, few act heroically. Most people, most of the time, do nothing. And that's the ones we have to focus on, both the greater good and our Heroic Imagination Project. Dante says the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in times of great moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. Martin Luther King says we must learn that passively to accept an unjust system is to cooperate with that system, and therefore to become a participant in its evil. Canadian peacekeeping forces in Bosnia were forced to watch Serbs brutally rape gypsy girls, and they were not allowed to intervene. I met one of these guys who still has, years later, post-traumatic stress disorder. Canadian force in Rwanda witnessed the same thing, and because they were peacekeeping, were not allowed to intervene, and many of these people have long-lasting psychological consequences. Here's a very different kind of hero.
On the New York City subway, it's hard enough finding someone who will give up his seat to a stranger, let alone be willing to give up his life for one.
The train was coming in like that.
It happened just 50-year-old Wesley Autry, a construction worker and Navy veteran, was standing on a subway platform with his 2 little girls when right in front of them, a man started having a seizure.
He kind of stumbled and over his own feet and fall backwards. I see a train coming, but the train is so close, I'm like, what do I do?
Wesley jumped onto the tracks and thought if he could just lie on top of the man, keep him from flailing, maybe the train would roll right over both of them. The clearance was exactly 21 inches. Wesley and the man, 20 and a half.
No way the train can stop before this gentleman could get him up off the tracks. So he covered him with his body and pushed him down to a point where the train wouldn't hit his head and held him down under the tracks. while the train came and rolled right over the top of him.
It gave Wesley's children the scare of their young lives.
I thought he was going to get killed.
And Wesley, the scare of his, too.
I'm like talking to him, sir, you can't move. I got 2 kids up here looking for the father to come back. I don't know you, you don't know me, but listen, don't panic. You know, I'm here to save you.
As for the guy Wesley saved, he's 20-year-old Cameron Hollipter. And other than a few scrapes and bruises, his father says he's doing fine.
Mr. Autry's instinctive and unselfish act saved our son's life.
You know, the word hero gets thrown around a lot nowadays.
What a better way to say it to start off the new year than to save a life.
Nice to be reminded of what one really looks like. Steve Hartman, CBS News, New York.
So what one looks like is the most ordinary person in the world. He's 50 years old. He's never done anything like that. There were 75 people on the platform. And the question for psychologists is, could you have kicked... Whoops. Could you have kicked him out? And I don't think so.
Right. Okay, so resisting destructive obedience. Okay, it's interesting. Became his life's work after the Stanford prison experiment. I think understanding and in some ways making amends for that experiment because he was the leader of it. He was the instigator of a very dangerous thing that happened. So this is a direct follow-on. He went on to study what makes people heroes, what makes people able to resist destructive obedience. Okay. So, first thing is taking responsibility for your actions regardless of authority. Secondly, if one person is disobedient, it can give others a model of how to act so that they may also become disobedient, perhaps. Questioning authority figures' motives and judgments is very important. This is why a free press is so important. You need someone to question. Okay, if you don't have that, you can't resist. Being aware of the innate potential for blind obedience, just being aware that you have that within you as an ordinary human being is enough to make a significant difference in being able to say, no, I don't want to be part of this. Okay, so that's that. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week. Good luck.